Hi, I'm Monica Packer, and you're listening to About Progress, where we are about progress made practical. Can I start by describing the best Saturday morning I recently had? We slept in until around 7:30, which may not sound like sleeping in, but it is if you're in a household with a toddler, for sure. And then I got to go on a long walk outside in the very cold weather. I hate being cold, but what I do love is bundling up. And I totally did that. I was bundled up to my eyeballs in every layer possible. And once I got home, I made some oatmeal. I topped it with Nutella and berries. And after I was done eating, my kids played. I got to sit on the couch and I cuddled up with a warm blanket and I watched a few episodes of a British couple renovating their countryside manor. A dream. In a recent episode, I shared about my personal goals for 2025. Now, writing them was a big push for me. I haven't done a great job of prioritizing my personal goals the last few years. But doing these goals is admittedly requiring more of a push as well. And that's because I have some big goals on my list, like writing a book. But to get to those goals, I know I must stick to one of the most important goals on that list, one that doesn't really look like it fits in, and it's to rest. There are metaphorical seasons in our lives, times where we know it's time to charge ahead, and others when it's time to rest. If you're like me, the latter type of season, a personal winter, if you will, is really hard to embrace. Seasons of rest and retreat have often felt forced on me rather than chosen. But I'm learning, as I'm decidedly approaching middle age, I'm learning to choose these winter times of my life rather than to resist them, to recognize them when they come, and then to lean into the quiet, the introspection, the closing in, and the slowing down these winters bring. If you're facing a literal or figurative winter in your life, maybe it's time for you to stop resisting and better value what the season has in store for you. In today's interview, I have the great honor of interviewing Katherine May, the author of Wintering, a book that I know will deeply shift the way you see the winters you may face. In our discussion, you'll learn what wintering is and how to do so in ways where you better prioritize the power of rest, retreat, and relationships this season brings. Katherine May is an internationally renowned writer, podcaster, and speaker whose work touches on nature, spirituality, slow living, and neurodivergence. Her books Wintering and Enchantment were both global bestsellers. Katherine writes the popular Substack newsletter, The Clearing. Her journalism and essays have appeared in a range of publications, including The New York Times, The Observer, The Wall Street Journal, Time, and Aeon. She hosts the chart-topping podcast, How We Live Now. Katherine lives by the sea in Whitstable, United Kingdom, with her husband, son, and pets. She loves walking, sea swimming, and cooking enormous feasts. That interview was coming up after a quick break for our sponsors. This episode is sponsored by Air Doctor. Americans take about 20,000 breaths a day and spend an average of 90% of their time indoors. The indoor air that we breathe can be up to 100 times more polluted than outdoor air, according to the EPA. Indoor air pollutants can cause respiratory symptoms like sneezing, congestion, scratchy throat, and even more serious health problems. So what's the solution? Air Doctor, an award-winning purifier that eliminates 99.99% of dangerous contaminants like allergens, viruses, smoke, gases, mold spores, and more. Air Doctor was voted Best Air Purifier by Newsweek, so it's no surprise that 98% of Air Doctor customers agree their home's air feels safer, cleaner, and healthier. And we are in that boat. We live in the Salt Lake Valley, which is famous for many good things, but infamous for its smog because we basically live in a giant bowl. A couple weeks back, we had one of those bad air quality weeks where people were not supposed to go outside much at all. And I noticed that my air doctor was not only working well and how clean the air felt inside our house, it was also working overtime and automatically too. Unlike other air purifiers, Air Doctor captures invisible particles 100 times smaller than standard HEPA filters. Head to airdoctorpro.com and use promo code MONICA to get up to $300 off today. Air Doctor comes with a 30-day money-back guarantee plus a 3-year warranty, an $84 value free. Get this exclusive podcast-only offer now at airdoctorpro.com. That's airdoctorpro.com using promo code MONICA. One of the long-standing things that has connected us as a community is the Do Something list. The first one I ever made way back in 2016 totally changed my life and actually led to this podcast. And I have heard from hundreds of women over the years from the About Progress community that the Do Something list has changed their lives too. What is it? Well, it's a way for you to prioritize your own fulfillment, to explore who you are, and all outside the pressures of goals and resolutions. If you're ready to have more hobbies, to have more creativity, to have more fun, or rest, or connection this year, whatever it is, make sure you make your own Do Something list. To help you, I have a free training that is ready for you online right now. Go to aboutprogress.com/DSL, and you can sign up for my free training, which includes a video and audio workshop, resources, including a guide and examples of so many DSLs from real women of this community. Again, go to aboutprogress.com/DSL to get your free training. Katherine May, welcome to About Progress.
Thank you for having me. I've got a feeling you're my people.
Oh, you've already made me smile. I can't wait for my people to get to know you better. I got to know you first through Enchantment. I read
Okay.
that first,
Lovely.
and then Wintering, which I am
Wonderful.
equally obsessed with. In Wintering, you take us through a literal and figurative winter in your life. And I've been curious since that experience and documenting it and writing it in such a beautiful way. I've been wondering how that journey of doing so and putting it out in the world has helped you through other winters that have followed since then.
Oh, that's such a good question because I always write books to learn about something. It's the best way I have to really dig deep into knowledge that I want to acquire. And I hate the idea of writing a book about something I already know. Like, I really like that experience of learning as I go along.
Mm.
And articulating what I articulated in Wintering has really changed the way I've seen things. Like, I started it from a point of view of wanting to share how normal I thought it was to winter. So that didn't change.
Yeah.
But what has changed for me is the kind of depth of that experience and the sense, I think, of the shape of it, actually, of that real understanding of how Wintering almost has a narrative arc, not the book, but the experience.
Yeah.
And of course, what that comes from is talking to loads of people about it afterwards and hearing people's stories and really getting a sense of the commonality of that experience and how going down deep into that really dark time is slower than I think I ever thought it was, actually. I've begun to perceive the long tail of it much more, but also to see it as like a spiritual experience almost. I don't think it's too grand a word to use to really truly perceive how change like completely washes through us during those moments. And the way that we come out is with this wisdom and this sense of like how the world works. I think the real beauty of it has only come to me later than writing the book even.
And I'm sure that's definitely bolstered by the many people who have been able to share their own narrative arc with you as they
Amazing.
wintered.
Yeah. Yeah. And just being able to look each other in the eye, I think, and say, I see you. It's so powerful. It's something that has been kept so secret in our lives and that's been seen as so shameful. And here we all are. And it turns out that pretty much everyone has gone through it. And the people who don't relate to the book, just haven't got there yet. That's my marketing slogan, right?
It's accurate. You're definitely
Yeah,
selling
I
truth
genuinely
there.
think it's true. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
I genuinely think that's true. That great if you've skipped a hard winter so far, but unfortunately, it is a very natural part of our human life cycle and a really normal social experience too. And it will come. And I'm the person that's here to say that's okay. Actually, it will be
Mm.
fine. Ultimately,
I'm sure, and even the word wintering, people are getting what this is really about, how it's both a seasonal thing, but
Mm,
also a life cycle kind of thing. But
yeah.
could you explain a little bit more about what wintering really is?
Mm. So, wintering is a word that I've borrowed from the natural world, and it's a book that's partly about the experience of meteorological winter, what it's like to live in the cold, in the dark, and what are the strategies for getting through it, if you like. But not just strategies for bossing it, but strategies for appreciating it and really understanding its messaging. But it's also a metaphorical exploration of human winters, the way that,
Mm,
as a natural part of our life cycle, we have downturns and we have seasons in the cold. And during that time, we probably feel very isolated from the rest of the world and probably feel like catastrophe is taking place. But actually, when you begin to look at the life experiences of people that do that and engage with our own sensing during that time, you begin to realize that this is, I'm going to quote myself, like not the death of the life cycle, but it's crucible. It's the beginning of a rebirth, and it's a time when we kindle a new self and a new life. And so, in both senses, I just wanted to explain that winter is beautiful and not horrible after all, and very necessary.
And that's what I would like to lean into right now, that whole
Mm,
idea of appreciating our own personal winters as well as the actual
yeah.
winter season. But I think the former is more important because what I believe we tend to do as humans is we either white knuckle through a winter
Mm-mm.
or we power through, or maybe we isolate through, which is
Yeah.
way different
Yeah.
than the power of retreat, what you talk about. So, what kind
I
of
think we probably
mistakes do
do
you
all
see?
three, actually.
And all, at the
I think
same
the
time,
truth is, yeah. Yeah, maybe all at the same time. I think particularly for overachievers,
uh-huh.
there is that sense that we do not want to see a winter coming. Like we
Mm,
are used to that graph that strides upwards. We only know how to define ourselves in terms of success. And so when that wintering moment comes for us, we first of all try and resist it really hard.
yeah.
And we have the toolkit to do that very well, probably better than most people, which means that by the time we really hit the worst part, we're much more exhausted than everybody else because we have taken ourselves well beyond what our bodies are capable of doing. And that's when we see those patterns of really deep burnout that take years to recover from. So yeah, I think we do all of that. I'm afraid it's not either or. I think we try the first and then the first ends up completely flattening us. And then
Yeah.
we do the isolation because the shame kicks in because we don't believe that we, of all people, should be hit by this. We believe that we should have been able to find a way through.
So resisting it does not help, but learning to
No,
welcome it. Yeah,
yeah,
welcoming it and as well as even appreciating it can help
yeah,
us move through it better.
yeah. I mean, resisting it doesn't stop it from happening. I think there are loads and loads of people that still believe that they can somehow take the right number of steps to stop it from occurring. And actually, that's not what this is about. This is about genuinely impossible situations coming up, and their impact is very real. And in fact, if we can get rid of the idea that bossing it is avoiding it, and that actually the way to really get the most out of a wintering is to lean into it and to let its full scope visit us, because it is something that will profoundly change us, reinforce our values, renew our sense of purpose in the world, reconnect us in deep ways with the people that matter most to us. And in lots of ways, it's a shedding of a skin, it's a shedding of an illusion, I think. And it's the experience of one life falling away and the next life emerging. And I think once we can let go of those kind of achievement narratives that everything's about our imposition of will on life, and start to see that sometimes stuff will happen to us anyway, and that doesn't make us weak. There's actually strength in absorbing that rather than resisting it. Then we can maybe begin to get somewhere with it.
So I'm the how girl, and I think a lot of my audience is too. When this is connecting, but then I get stuck in the how because it is so foreign to the way I have tried to muscle through those winters in the past. And by the way, you're right. The resistance of them never made them go away. It actually made it harder.
Yep.
So how
Much
can
more
we
painful.
lean in? Yeah. How can we lean into this crucible then? What are some actual things to keep in mind, things to try, strategies that you would recommend?
Okay, so I'm going to say the painful thing, which is you got to let go of strategy thinking altogether. This is about learning to experience, actually. And that means letting everything slow right down. I think for me, when that's happened to me, that's been the most painful thing, like this sense that the world on the outside is making progress. It's almost like there's a party in the next room. You can glimpse it through the curtains, but you are not part of it. And this is why successful people are so ill-equipped for their winters, because we just want to get back in that room. We want to rush that as much as possible. And if you rush back into that room, you'll fall back out again, and you'll fall back harder. And you'll keep falling back out until the world has finally taught you the lesson that you need to learn, which is that you no longer belong in that room. And so if you want a strategy, you go out and walk every day. You try and find ways that suit you to reflect. You meditate, you pray, you journal, whatever it is that helps you to enter into that reflective space. You cut down on your commitments as much as you possibly can. You make yourself comfortable, and you wait. You wait for the next life to arrive. It's so hard to explain that to someone that's used to saying, no, what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw up a spreadsheet and I'm going to do this and this and I'm going to set myself targets. Like, none of that is relevant to you right now. You need to rest. This is an invitation into resting. This is an invitation to draw back, to find out what's harming you, because you probably don't know it right away. And it's an invitation to radically engage with your sense of agency and your sense that you have to control everything. That's all going to be going, unfortunately. Sooner or later, yeah.
The how side of me hates an answer.
Yep.
But the
I know.
lived experience side of me,
I know.
You're right. You're right. And it's so both so simple and complex to do. As you say, rest, to retreat. What would you say for the woman who is comparing her winter self with her past self? Because I think, of course, there are so many outside voices that when we have to slow down, and that I love that was really it for you, ultimately, like just slow down.
Forced into it, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I had to be forced into it, though. There was no part of me that liked the idea of slowing down in any way. But this is the thing. People often say to me, like, I can't afford to slow down. I don't have a kind of lifestyle that lets me slow down. And that massively misses the point, because the thing is, you will be stopped. You will be slowed down. That's what happened to me in the end, that I got so sick that I could barely walk to the end of my street.
Yeah.
And it wasn't a choice. The choice had been taken away from me by then, because I'd missed loads of opportunities to take the right choices a long time ago. So by the time I entered my winter, my choice had gone. It wasn't an act of will anymore. And I think we tend to see that as weakness. But it's just the inevitable. It's just our bodies visiting us. And it's just something that we don't have a model for in our society. Like we don't see people who have met that point in their lives because they hide themselves away or we find them completely uninteresting.
Mm.
And one of the things that I think we can do in the good times is learn to witness people in the bad times, is to really go out of our way to notice the people who've fallen from view, because they could well be in that very quiet, isolated phase, and they might be communicating something to us that is a sort of signpost for what's to come for us one day.
Mm-hmm. So the outside voices we've talked about, the inside one I wanted to touch on a bit more when you're in that winter and you just want to get into that next room or return to the room you were in before,
Yeah.
right? Like you talked about, and how difficult it is to push against this inner comparison monster, right? That is making you resist the slowing down, resist the rest because of the former self that was able to do the same thing in a different way before. What advice do you have for someone who is really working through the inner critic, the inner resistor there?
I think you take it hour by hour, honestly. And I think what you'll notice, if you let your attention rest on what you're going through rather than what you want to do, so find ways to watch your emotions as if they're clouds going off across the sky, you'll notice that every single emotion is held in this state of being. Like, things pass through you really fast. So you might feel unbearably sad for 1 hour, but if you watch, you'll notice that joy will come the next hour, or absolute blind fury, or silliness kind of visits you sometimes. And sometimes you have these moments of deep comfort and beauty. Everything's contained in that space. Your work is to learn to notice that everything, because almost certainly what's been happening in your previous busy life is that you haven't been engaging with all of that feeling, all of that sentiment, all of that sensing. And it's a real skill to let your attention rest on exactly what is being presented to you in the here and now. And when you can, when you do that, when you allow that to happen, when you welcome all of the negative feelings equally as much as all of the positive feelings, you will quickly notice that you've probably changed without realizing it already. You're not waiting for the change to happen. The change has already happened. Like, things will rise up in you that will tell you things about the life you've been living that you have been pushing back. You might be feeling an extreme aversion to your job, or your relationship might already be dying, or you might have been ignoring physical pain for a long time. All of these things can only come to us when we make space for them. And we can't heal them until we've made that space. So it's a very different model of work, but I think it's still work. Like, you have a task to do, which is to feel your feelings during that time. And it's probably one of the hardest jobs you'll ever do. And no one gives you a tick at the end of it. Nobody goes, well done, good work, 10 out of 10.
And you've made it, you're done. This episode is sponsored by Element. If you struggle with headaches, cramps, fatigue, brain fog, or general weakness, did you know that it could be due to you having an electrolyte deficiency or imbalance? Electrolytes are charged minerals that aid in hydration to our very cells, which are very important. And busy women often need help with hydration, and I'm no different. This is why I adore, and I mean adore, our sponsor, Element, spelled LMNT. Element is a zero-sugar electrolyte drink mix that helps anyone stay hydrated, without the dodgy ingredients and artificial colors found in popular electrolyte and sports drinks. I put 1 stick of Element into my giant tumbler every morning before I do my workout. And not only have I grown to love its salty taste, I love all the flavors I've tried. My very favorite have to be raspberry and the chocolate caramel, and maybe the citrus and the watermelon. Okay, I clearly love them all. I have also been loving having fewer headaches and less leg cramps waking me up at night. Our podcast manager, Taylor, is a big fan too and has been for some time, as she has used Element to aid her hydration as a workout instructor long before they became a sponsor. Element is for everyone, from Navy SEALs to Olympians to moms like me. Get your free Element sample pack with any purchase at drinkelement.com/progress. Also try the new Element Sparkling, a bold 16-ounce can of sparkling electrolyte water. I love this water too, and it's the perfect pickup in the late afternoon or early evening. If you don't like what you order, Element will refund your order, no questions asked. Again, get your free Element sample pack with any purchase at drinkelement.com/progress. Now that the holidays are ending, I bet you thought your list would get a lot less intense, but I'm sure it's not. With so much going on all day, every day, I want you to think about where you are on your own list. It is so hard to prioritize ourselves, but that's what we need to do so that we can show up as ourselves to our responsibilities. If you find yourself showing up as a less than ideal version of you as you are starting this new year, I want you to think about how you could put yourself on your own list. And here's one way you can do that. Get on the wait list for my first Sticky Habit Intensive for 2025. We are starting mid-February. The intensive is my 21-day live course, community, and challenge that helps busy women form habits that stick. The kind of self-care habits that make women feel more like themselves. Past participants have prioritized feeding themselves lunch, time to work on family history, morning workouts, evening reading sessions, meal planning, and so much more. I am betting any to all of those things sound good right now. So get on the waitlist for the next Sticky Habit Intensive as spots are capped, and the waitlist not only gets first dibs to join before the general public, but they get a decent discount to boot. You can do so by clicking on the link in the show notes or going to aboutprogress.com/intensive. I don't plan to host intensive very many times this year, so get on your list by getting on mine and go to aboutprogress.com/intensive. This process sounds so much more intuitive than I think we give credit to, meaning for those of us like me who want the playbook.
Yeah.
And in leaning into the winter,
Mm.
we learn to put the playbook aside.
Yeah.
It's an intuitive process. Like, I think it's about learning a lot of self-trust that you lost along the way.
Yeah. I think the first thing to say really importantly is that Wintering is not like a book that gives you a playbook. It's an exploration, and I always wanted to walk alongside my readers while they learnt themselves. I've got no interest in telling people what to do because people are
Yeah.
too smart for that and they don't need it. But I think the point about intuition is really interesting because so many of us learn to suppress our intuition very early on in our lives. Like, we realize that for a variety of reasons, our intuition holds us back or doesn't serve us because it lets us know when we're uncomfortable. And in order to succeed at a whole range of things, or to cope with, say, difficult family environment, we come to believe that the best thing to do is to squash down our intuition and to run over our feelings. So, like, traditionally, the ballerina learns to suppress the feeling of pain in her feet, or the child with a critical parent learns to just not feel that, to keep working until perhaps they'll get some respect from that parent. I'm autistic and I had to suppress my intuition in a very different way. Like, I had to learn to not feel my extreme sensory input because otherwise the world felt unbearable. So I had to squash all of that down. There's loads of different ways it happens. But the problem is that not only does that intuition serve us really well if we let it happen, but also it will rise up in us eventually. And so quite often what we'll feel is that we've been running along for so long, pushing back really strong signals that would have told us to stay safe, that would have kept us out of this situation. And when we let that back in, the world is going to seriously jangle in you for a while. I have really been through that process since my diagnosis. Like, that the uprising of sensation again was unbelievable at first. I couldn't believe that I'd been able to squash this down. And then after a couple of years of letting it be, letting it come and adapting so that I didn't have to feel that, I didn't have to put myself in the situations where it was like, where I felt attacked all the time. I now look back and think, I can't believe I survived like that. I can
Mm.
see now why I was so exhausted all the time, why I was so stressed, why I was so overwrought, why my relationships were often so poor. And so, yeah, that sense of intuition, that word intuition is something that all of us need to stop thinking is like a weird, spooky thing and actually come back to thinking that this is our fundamental sensing telling us what we need and
Mhm.
telling us very clearly what we don't need. Yeah. Intuition is a huge one.
You said it in the book. I'm actually going to read a quick little quote from you. You said, quote, "Wintering is a moment of intuition. Our
Mm.
true needs felt keenly as a knife," unquote. That really does sum it up. I think people who haven't gone through the same experience as you would still be able to understand a series of self denial
Yeah.
moments that turn into an act of self betrayal.
Yeah.
And that's how we often get lost into the really hard winters because of how long we have been denying what we already knew we needed
Yeah.
and wanted.
We keep running towards the danger because we've learned so hard to ignore the danger. And then we can't believe it when it gets us. We're so
Yeah.
shocked by that. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
But there's like a sort of balancing sentence at the end of the book that balances the kind of wintering is a moment of intuition,
Yeah.
which is I assumed my needs were reasonable. And that
Mm.
for me is one of the most powerful sentences in the book, the one that I come back to so often, because actually I've so often assumed my needs aren't reasonable.
Of
And
course.
it sounds so simple. It sounds like primary school, right? Like, oh, I assume of course I assume my needs are reasonable. They're my needs. We don't. We absolutely don't.
Yeah.
And if we can learn to notice our needs in the first place, which is the big challenge for loads of us, and then to think, I might actually need that. I might need to leave this party because it's too loud and someone's been really unpleasant to me and I don't want to be here anymore. I might need to go to bed because I'm tired. I might need to eat something because actually skipping lunch every day is just making me hungry and mad and I can't think straight. Like the simple things that we would let children do, we need to let ourselves do too.
Hmm. We've spoken a lot about that return to self during
Mhm.
wintering and how that can be done through rest and retreat. But one thing I was really struck by in your own wintering was how connected you
Mm.
still were to the people who matter most to you.
Yeah.
When I hear the word retreat, I think my go to way of dealing with hard things is being a turtle, like going in the shell and not letting people in.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's another thing that doesn't work. How are relationships kind of the third R in wintering, rest,
Yeah.
retreat, relationships?
Interesting. Not many people think about that. That's a lovely question. And I would say that sometimes wintering is about cutting off from relationships that are harming us. And sometimes it's about learning to delve deeper into the relationships that sustain us. And another part of that intuition and sensing is allowing yourself the space to tune in enough to know the difference.
Mm.
And I think frequently our impression of who does take care of us and who is a positive force in our lives will shift radically during a time of wintering. We often have been attracted to the kind of big, shiny people, as I like to think of them, the sort of suns rather than the moons, the people that output a lot of heat and noise, but can burn us really easily. And during a time when life retracts, the kind of quiet people in our lives, the constant people, the faithful people rise up. And we notice them because they make themselves known in that time. They come and offer us gentle care. They come and say that they've noticed that we're not around at the moment or that we seem a bit sad. And there's a huge enrichment that happens during those times and a real sense of shift in how we understand who is good for us, who actually cares and who we care about. But I also think that it's hugely therapeutic during those times to retreat with the right people, in time with beloved family members, rather than being out partying. I don't do much partying. This is a bad example for me, but being
I
out
mean, same
partying
here.
with what do I know about being out partying? In my youth, maybe. Like spending time with invalued, trusted relationships that nourish and sustain us, and with people that can bear to just sit beside us while we're sad. Who will say, let's watch a movie together, rather than, oh, come on, you've not been out for ages, you must come to this thing. That's the difference in the quality of that relationship.
Mhm.
And yeah, it's one of the life's great sifting devices, I would say.
So, with this, one of my favorite parts of your book, Wintering, was when you spoke about rituals
Mm.
and their power of helping us do these things. And
Yeah.
I wanted to know, what are the rituals that you are looking forward to this literal winter coming up that you're
Oh,
going to
that's
prioritize?
this is my sacred ground, the time we're coming into now. And
Mm.
those patterns were really established when I was writing the book. I've always loved winter. Like when I was a kid, my family Christmases were really big and important. And actually, I'd had this huge sense of loss as I went into adulthood because my grandmother died. And
Mhm.
as soon as she died, we let go of all our family traditions. It was wild. It was this huge moment of grief, and no one knew how to meet it. And we lost a lot. We let go of a lot.
Mm.
And writing Wintering gave me permission to find my own new rituals that I really needed. I now, every midwinter, so at the winter solstice, which is normally around the 21st of December, I hold a bonfire on the beach for closest friends. And it's the same group as every year because we look really forward to it now. And all we do is we stand around a little fire and watch the sun go down. And I think when we talk about ritual, we often think it's got to be a really big, significant thing, and we've got to do all this meaning making, and people have to chant words, and we have to hand people this specific idea that they're supposed to take in. I don't believe that about ritual at all.
Mm.
I believe that ritual is a kind of container that we make for ourselves, and we keep it as simple as possible, and we step into it and we bring the person we are on that day into the ritual. And the ritual will then let us observe ourselves coming in. It will let us see our own state. And so at midwinter, we stand around this bonfire, watch the sun go down. Sometimes it's raining, sometimes it's foggy. Sometimes we can actually see the sun, which feels like a kind of miracle. Sometimes we're checking our watches to check what sundown time was, because otherwise we'd have no idea, because this is England and the weather is not great. Um, Either way, when the sun goes down, we turn to each other and we say, we've turned the year. And it's a beautiful moment of quiet. The children are running wild over the beach. We are together. And you feel the peace fall down on us. And I cannot tell you now how much I look forward to that moment in the year. It is so simple and so beautiful. And of all the parts of my winter, that is the bit that I cling to the hardest now.
Now we all want to do that.
You
But
should
we
do
just
it. You
have
should.
to
I
move
recommend
there.
it.
We can have our own We Turn the Year moment,
Yeah,
which I think would be great. But
absolutely.
I also love the small rituals of, and I love that, by the way, what you just shared was simple. It wasn't like I have to prepare this
Yeah.
huge buffet, like we have to have decor, like we have to have speeches. And yeah, I loved how simple that
We
was.
sometimes bring like a bag of chips to the beach. That's the catering.
It's great. Sign me up. Uh, but a mug of tea, or like a book of poems that you love to read, or a journaling practice. A lot of these rituals are actually habits too, which can
Tiny
help us.
things, yeah. And I think a really simple one that most people could do is to light a candle on a dark afternoon, not at night. Like we think we're allowed to light
Yeah.
candles at nighttime or when we're in a romantic situation, whatever. You can light a candle whenever you like, and it's always really good. Like just that pause
Yeah.
while you light the flame is always beautiful, and it will help. It'll help you with whatever you're going through.
You are helping me think of something for me. 2023, I called it my survival year, but now I can say, oh, it was my winter
It was your
year.
wintering year.
Yeah, it was
I
my
remember
wintering year.
wintering.
And one of the rituals that saved me was sourdough.
Oh,
Just
yeah.
the whole process of keeping it alive and
Mm.
also kneading the bread. And I even started painting, and I'm not really an artist. I started to paint my loaves with flowers
I bet that
and
was
things like
lovely.
that. It was. And it's so funny because I think of anything personal development, self-help thing I could have done, the thing that saved me was a ritual of sourdough.
Yeah. You had something to take care of outside of yourself. And actually, one of the things that that points to as well is the power of somatics, the taking that
Mm,
rest into the body. And when we knead bread, we are giving our palms fantastic deep feedback, like deep pressure. And that in itself will help you. Like you'll be burning a bit of nervous energy.
yeah.
You'll be massaging your own hands. You'll be getting a bit tired. All of those things help hugely as part of the ritual and producing something lovely that you can eat afterwards. Eating is a great thing to do.
Didn't even think of the somatic connection, Catherine.
Yeah.
Now I'm just gonna go make something
Bread.
else.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
I
mean,
always make cinnamon buns when I'm fed up. There's a bit of
oh, yeah.
kneading, there's a bit of like quite fun shaping. I love watching things rise. Isn't that just a lovely kind
It
of
is a good feeling.
beautiful thing? Yeah.
Yeah.
And
And
so
eating,
much
yeah, of
too.
course. The end product is wonderful too.
Yeah.
Well, I
But
would
I'll
love
tell you the other thing, sorry,
uh
about baking and cooking when you're in a winter is that you get to share it and give it away. So I'll
uh-huh.
quite often make a preserve or a chutney or a pickle,
Yes.
and then I'll
Yeah.
jar it up and give it to someone, and it makes that little spark of connection that can just, like, you don't need too much in that time. You don't want a big conversation, you don't want a big social outing, but knocking on someone's door and say, "Hey, I made you a jar of pickle. Thank you. Nice to see you. Yeah, see you soon. Bye." Like sometimes that's the most we can manage at that point, but it's enough. It gives us a little of what we need.
Mm. Yeah, everything we've spoken of today is just this delicate dance, right? Of paying attention to yourself, of listening to yourself, but also pushing yourself, which honestly, like when I say pushing yourself to rest, to slow down
In
a different
yeah.
way. That I think what we can really hope people take away from this is you can do it. You can do this.
Absolutely. You're finding a different kind of toughness to the one that you thought you needed. And here's my tip for today. Take a look at your grandmother, because your grandmother has been through this, and look at all the little things she does to soothe her way through the day. They are guides. They are guides. That's why your grandmother bakes. That's why I'm thinking about my grandma, obviously, but she was a great kind of pickler. That's why she went to the library 3 times a week. She developed all these habits to take great care of herself, even though she was living a much more restricted life than she would have preferred by that point. Those people have got wisdom that we do not want to listen to anymore, but they know how to cope with a quietened life.
You actually created the perfect note to end on, because my typical last question is, what is one small way they can take action? And I think that's it. Look to
Taking
your
care of
grandmother.
yourself. Yeah, and take excellent care of yourself.
Catherine, this has been such a beautiful, magical interview for me.
Oh,
Thank
thank you. It's
you.
a lovely conversation. It's actually really nice to talk in terms of overachieving, because it's definitely
Hmm.
one of my diseases.
Yeah,
And I really understand it. I really understand the mindset and how hard it is to shift. And
it is
I
difficult.
think it's so important because we deserve to be around and we've got to look after ourselves better.
Hmm. And we deserve to feel happy, which is a big
Oh
part
my
of your
God.
book too,
Do you know
right?
what? More than that, content. We deserve to feel
Content.
content. And I think contentment is very hard for us to achieve because we are too busy trying to achieve other things. But that feeling of settledness, of calm, of being satisfied, of feeling like we're enough and that we have enough and that we've done enough, that's the state that we deserve.
I want to direct people to the book Wintering. We'll make sure we link to that, as well as How We Live Now, your podcast. Is there anywhere else you would like them to go?
I write a regular Substack at katherinemay.substack.com where we quite often talk about just this kind of thing as much as we can. And I've got really into sharing journaling prompts recently,
Fabulous.
which we all love. Like, I do them, I share them, I hear everyone's results. Like, it's really fun. So that might be really nice for some of you.
Yeah, I think you'll get me out of my one line a day, which is all I can muster because my brain is fried by the time I journal. So I love that.
There's a journaling technique of a sentence a day. Did you know that?
Yes, mine is just more had a good day. So
it's fine. That's really fine. Yeah.
There are days where I'm like, I would like more. I just don't know what to write about. So there we go. That would be great.
Let it be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, Katherine, the best. Thank you so much for taking the
thank
time.
you. It's been lovely. Thank you.
Genuinely. Try not to cry. I hope this episode gave you the hug and kick in the pants you need to grow. I'll now share the progress pointers. These are the notes I took so you don't have to. And those on my newsletter get them in a graphic form each week. You can sign up at aboutprogress.com/newsletter. Number 1. Wintering is not only the practice of embracing the literal meteorological season, but also the figurative winters of our lives, times where we are forced to slow down, to shed our old lives, and to let new ones emerge through rest and retreat. Number 2, doing both requires the push to embrace, rather than resist, the season we are in. Our winter seasons can reinforce our values, renew our sense of purpose in the world, reconnect us in deep, deep ways, and allow a new life and season to arise. Number 3, while the best strategy for wintering is no strategy, you can learn to embrace your winters by leaning in. Journal, take walks, turn to those who create comfort and space, get quiet, and rest. Number 4, contentment is what we should all be aiming for and what we all deserve. It's, quote, that feeling of settledness, of calm, of being satisfied, of feeling like we're enough and that we have enough and that we've done enough, unquote. And number 5, in wintering, you, quote, are finding a different kind of toughness to the one that you thought you needed, unquote. Progressors, wow, right? I've interviewed, I think, around 400 people for my podcast. And this was truly the most magical interview of my entire podcasting career. When I finished my call with Katherine, I experienced both this thrill and an exhale. It was a gift I will always cherish, and I'm so glad I had that time with her, and even better that I get to share it with you here. I wanted to soundbite every moment. I found myself turning every other line into a quote, so I strongly encourage you, if you liked this interview, to read Wintering today. It's such a beautiful but easy and encouraging read. It will give you both that thrill and the exhale you need. And again, be sure to follow Katherine May on her Substack and on Instagram. This show is listener supported. Members of the Supporters Club get access to 3 levels of exclusive benefits, including more content and more time with me. My favorite benefit is our private premium, always ad-free podcast called More Personal, where I lean into the personal side of personal development. All throughout January, we've been giving you shortened previews of what the content is on More Personal, and you can get your first month free by signing up for the Bestie or Ride or Die level using the code FREEMONTH. That code expires February 1st, so again, use the code FREEMONTH by February 1st and sign up as a Bestie or Ride or Die member of the Supporters Club. You can always support the show for free. Make sure you have subscribed or are following the show, leave us a rating and review, share the show with a friend. Any of those things are vital to the continuation of this work. Thank you so much for listening. Now go and do something with what you learned today. Wintering is not only the practice of embracing the literal meteorological. Wintering is not only the practice of embracing the literal meteorological. I got it. Okay.